Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Kelly, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications. Thank you for joining us today. I want to welcome one of our newer premium members, Plush Laser, who's located in Birmingham. So welcome Joseph Tardif and the Plush Laser team. And of course, we're welcoming our new member on behalf of our sponsor, Consumers Credit Union. We'll hear more from them later in the show. So we have a packed agenda today. So let's get started with just a few quick political updates, starting with the idea that there might be a tie in the legislature. And we haven't had a tie here in Michigan in the legislature since 1994. We've had some close ones this year, but we may be headed toward a 50-50 split. Why is that?
Yeah, this was kind of an interesting circumstance. So right now, the split in the House of Representatives is 56 to 54. So 56 Democrats, 54 Republicans. So really close, but not a tie. There are two representatives who are running for mayor this fall. So Lori Stone is running for mayor of Warren. So Representative Lori Stone in the House of Representatives running for the mayor of Warren. And also Kevin Coleman is running for mayor of Westland. So Macomb County, Wayne County, if those two are successful, and they're both strong, legit candidates, they absolutely could be successful, then for a while with those two vacancies, so somebody gets elected to one office, they have to vacate the current one that they have, it would become a 54-54 tie. And that would persist until there was another election to fill those vacancies. It would have to be a primary and then a general election. Those would be special elections, so it takes several months for that to happen. So what happens in the event of a tie? Well, it would affect the things that get passed, but it wouldn't likely result in shared governance because it wasn't that way from the beginning. The Speaker of the House is elected by the majority of the body. That happened the very first day of the House of Representatives session. They elect who is the Speaker. Now, later on, if you want to change who the Speaker is, you need a majority vote. Even if the Republicans wanted to put up somebody or propose a co-speakership, that probably wouldn't happen. Not probably. It won't happen because they won't have a majority of the votes. A tie is not enough. You have to have a majority of votes to change leadership. So that the leadership of the House of Representatives won't change, but the ability to pass things will be substantially altered if it comes to fruition to where it's a 50-50 tie, and that tie would persist until special election were held to replace those representatives. They are two seats that are pretty lopsided on the Democratic side of the aisle. So when they're filled, they'll be filled by Democrats. They'll take the majority back at that point. But it could be a period of maybe as much as 3 or 4 months.
All right, definitely keeping an eye on that one. In other news, there's been at least 6 recall petitions submitted to the Board of Canvassers. What are the issues there?
Yeah, there's in law, you can submit petitions to recall people from public office. These are not likely to be successful, but as of today, they were filed against 5 Democrats and 1 Republican so far. There might be more that come. What happens is that people can file to get signatures, and they have to get a lot of signatures, thousands and thousands of signatures to get something on the ballot. But the first step is they have to go to the Board of Canvassers. Now, I say that it's not likely to be successful. Most recalls are not successful. That's just, looking back historically, it's not likely to be successful. But if you're one of the people that's on the recall list, it can disrupt your life, but it also allows you to raise money with no limits. And so what you might see from this is that those that have recalls against them go into fundraising overdrive. They get to raise money without the campaign finance limits. And it may end up, those that are trying to remove a few of these state representatives from office may end up inadvertently helping them or giving them an advantage. So it's kind of interesting. There was a recall election. Nobody really thought of it in those terms, the money raising terms, but there was an effort that was not serious against Governor Whitmer in her first term to try to recall her from office. And so what it did is it lifted her, the campaign finance limits on what she could raise. And so she raised lots of money. She's one of the strongest fundraisers you'll find anywhere in the country. And so she was able to raise a lot and then donate that money over to the party, which was a whole different way of fundraising. So these people that are trying to make a statement and recall people from office may end up hurting the very people that they're trying to recall. So it's you could make a novel out of this stuff, Sarah.
All right, and last up for this little section of the show is the active race heating up in the 7th Congressional District. This is the district I live in, so I'm particularly interested to hear what you have to say today.
This is one of the national battleground seats. This is one that could go either way in terms of its political makeup, a 50-50 style seat. Alyssa Slotkin is the incumbent representative, the member of Congress from this district, the 7th Congressional District, center part of the state, Ingham County, Livingston County, some of Oakland County. And she is now running for Senate to replace Debbie Stabenow. So she'll be vacating this office. So it's what they call an open seat. And boy, is it shaping up to be a marquee matchup in this. Both the Republicans and the Democrats came up with very, very experienced, strong candidates, people that have a track record of winning elections. So the Republicans, Tom Barrett, who is in the House of Representatives and then in the state Senate, and then Curtis Hertel, who served in the House of Representatives and the Senate as well. His father was actually Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives years ago, kind of a political dynasty, if you will. Both strong fundraisers, strong campaigners, strong, just really high political acumen. So the 7th Congressional District is really shaping up to be a strong matchup. And so that's our kind of quick hits on the political front and the things that are happening out there. Now I wanted to invite in to join in the conversation Sandy Bloom from the Consumers Credit Union, sponsor of the Small Business Briefing. So first, thank you so much for your sponsorship. Love the relationship that we have developed with Consumers Credit Union going back really when we started to get close during the pandemic, and really have the relationship has blossomed since then. Strong supporters of our mission and our members, and do so much for small business. Sandy, I thought maybe you could start out with just a little bit of an insight of what you're seeing in terms of activity with respect to small businesses, maybe starting on the lending side. You guys deal with a lot of business all over the state, all different types of industries. What sorts of things are you seeing?
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. Yes, we appreciate the relationship and the partnership that we have with SBAM. I can't tell you how many of my customers I've told about the Small Business Briefing. Tell them to join in on Mondays and Thursdays in the afternoons in the fall, and just such good information. So appreciate our partnership there. But yes, we are seeing some changes on the business banking side. As we all know, interest rates are starting to creep up. I think since they've started moving up, they've gone up 5%. So prime going from 3.25% to where it is now really has an impact on our business members. And quite honestly, I think it's slowed our loan demand. When you've got a business member that's looking at an expansion, they look at the economics of it and say, all right, I'm investing this much. What's my return on investment there? And quite honestly, as the interest rates go up, their return on investment goes down. And so we are seeing some pass on expansions right now, and some just kind of waiting in the sidelines until things slow or interest rates maybe creep down in the next year, hopefully a little bit.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when the Federal Reserve ratchets up interest rates, it's really the thing that they're trying to do is to cool off the economy. And so sounds like maybe you see some of that happening. How about with the other side of the ledger? That I've noticed that consumers has been very competitive on the deposit side of the business. So people happen to have money in the bank as opposed to needing, or money in the credit union as opposed to needing to borrow. Then maybe these higher interest rates are paying off.
Yeah, those businesses with cash definitely is paying off. They're saving that for the next rainy day. And so, yes, right now we've got a money market account that's earning 4% interest, and that's locked in for an entire year, up to $1 million. And so if you've got some cash sitting aside, you can earn some decent interest And what's nice about a money market is it's completely liquid. So if you happen to find that big investment, there's no penalty like there is in a CD for taking your money out. So that has really brought in some interest from not only our current members, but some others in the community as well. It really is a good time for savers right now, certainly.
So Sandy, it seems like every time I turn around, I see Consumers Credit Union at a new place. And maybe get an idea of what your footprint looks like across the state. But I know you've got a pretty aggressive 5-year plan too. Where are you at and where are you headed?
Yeah. So we are all along the lakeshore. We go from Muskegon all the way down to South Haven. We were born and raised, if you will, in the Kalamazoo market. And so we've got a pretty big footprint in Kalamazoo. About 9 years ago, we started opening up offices in Grand Rapids. We now have 7 offices in Grand Rapids, and we go south, north. We're in the Cutlerville area. And then most recently, we opened up 2 offices in Lansing. We've got 2 open. We've got another 2 slated to open early part of 2024. One is in East Lansing and one is in Lake Lansing. So yes, definitely aggressive growth plans there. One of the things that's been approved by the regulators is for us to do business now through the entire state of Michigan. So we're working with our realtors and trying to find the best place to open up that next expansion. There's been a lot of, I know where I would like us to go. I mean, everybody's got their thoughts, but they've got a specific formula into where would be best for putting our next office. But yes, we've also got plans in the next 5 years to move out of the Michigan footprint as well. So pretty aggressive rates of expansion there for sure.
Yeah, excellent. How about let's finish with this. What are root beer drops?
Oh yes, one of my favorite things here. So I don't know if you can see this or not. This is root beer. It's made by one of our business partners in Cedar Springs, and so we like to use our business members whenever we can. But one of the things we'll do in our community, and here's our, we're brewing up some good business. So this is how we advertise our 4% money market. But what we'll do is go in our communities, because a lot of people don't realize that credit unions serve the business community. And so we will go out, we'll drop a 6-pack of root beer off. Sometimes they're disappointed it's nothing stronger than the root beer here, but want to be careful with that. But we'll just go in there and drop off a 6-pack of root beer and say, we're in your community. We'd love to talk more, but get to know us a little bit. And so you'd be surprised at how many people are surprised that we just go in and say hello and love to meet you. And it's a pretty soft sales tool, but one that's getting us noticed for sure.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Sandy, for your dedication and help and partnership with SBAM and our members, and all you do for the community as well. I see the impact, and seems like every time I see something cool happening in one of the communities you guys operate in, there's Lynn Jarman Johnson, who's right at the table representing Consumers Credit Union. So thank you so much for all that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you both.
All right. Yes. Thanks, Sandy. And thanks to the whole team at Consumers Credit Union. So Brian, we have a couple other issues to get to today. The first is a win that Enbridge received with a recent decision made by the Army Corps of Engineers. So what was that? What's that win? What's next?
Yeah, so you might recall the last time we talked about this, the Army Corps of Engineers pushed way off like the timetable for them to issue the final permit that is needed to put the tunnel underneath the Straits of Mackinac, about 100 feet into bedrock, out of the water and under the straits. So that was pushed way out. One thing though that some environmental groups were trying to do was to get the environmental impact study to be on not just the 4 miles that go across the straits. And yes, it is 4 miles. I know that it's marketed that the Mackinac Bridge is 5 miles long, but the straits are 4 miles. But that section is where they needed to do an environmental impact study. What was being asked of them, and what they didn't immediately dismiss, was for that that environmental impact study to be on the 645 miles of the entire pipeline, to essentially re-review everything and the whole project and the portions that run through the United States. And so that of course would have pushed off the project, I don't know, 50 years. Like it's too big of a study, it just would never have gotten done. And they did reject that. So it is just the environmental impact study is just going to be on the new project that is being proposed, not on an expanded scope of what the entire pipeline means, but rather what does this change in the pipeline means, which is the correct decision, according to the law anyway, that when a section of infrastructure is being replaced, the normal guidelines and standards that these permits require is for the change to be reviewed, not other things that have nothing to do with the change.
All right. Next up is a new department which is focused on education that Governor Whitmer has formed. So what are the goals of this department and how is it going to work with the current Department of Education?
Yeah, this is, so it's called MyLEAP, the Michigan Department of Lifelong Education Achievement and Potential, MILEAP, MyLEAP. So the Constitution limits the number of departments the state can have, but the state has operated underneath the constitutional limit for a while. So governors can reorganize departments and assign different tasks in different places, and they can add departments up to the constitutional limit. So what Governor Whitmer has done here is form a new department, and it's early childhood education, and then it's post-high school education as well, so higher education. And she's taken different, so not K-12. K-12 remains with the Department of Education, the traditional Department of Education, which is not under the governor, by the way. Michigan, that department is under a separately elected Board of Education. The political parties pick who's on the Board of Education. I know it's just a whole different way of doing things, but the Republicans and the Democrats, they are the only ones who can nominate people to be on the State Board of Education. So it operates separate from the governor's authority. Anyway, but what the governor did here was to form this new committee. It's not K-12, but it's early childhood education. So it's stuff like Great Start, the child care stuff, all the child care stuff that has been happening will go into this new department. In the Department of Treasury, they do scholarships and for the state scholarships for higher education. That will be moved to this department. And also Reconnect, you've heard us talk a lot about Reconnect, tuition-free community college for adults returning to school to upskill. And that is moving from the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity to this new department. And you know, it was a bit of a surprise. It was not something that was being talked about as it was before it came out, but it has been going back to Governor Engler. So Engler, Granholm, Snyder, Whitmer, there's been a constant, I would say, generally frustration with trying to align with a department that is not under the governor. And so what it looks to me like things are being consolidated, everything outside of the K-12 system, which is mostly under the Department of Education, being consolidated in new state Department of Education. So that early childhood education part is removed from the Department of Education, put with this new one. And so we'll see where it goes from here. They'll have to hire a new director. The timing was a little surprising because we just got done with the state just got done with the budget. And so this department, they'll have to do like a supplemental budget to create some positions move some positions from departments to other departments. I don't know that it'll be a lot more money being appropriated because they'll be able to, through the state administrative board, move budget from one department to another department. So just take a line item from one and move it to another. That's something the state administrative board can do without legislation, but they're still going to need like a director and deputy directors, and that's just kind of the regular administrative positions will have to be created. And presumably we'll see a supplemental budget proposed sometime before October 1st.
Okay, so in this morning's New York Times, there was a really in-depth article about COVID and a lot of data presented that, is suggesting that the pandemic really is over. So can you talk a little bit about how they came to that conclusion and the data they were sharing?
Yeah, I really found it to be quite insightful and interesting and logical, the way that they've laid it out and kind of the declaration. Like all of us have moved on, or most of us have really moved on from the pandemic, but people still get COVID. People still die from COVID. I think it's about 80 people a day, and and so at what point is it no longer a pandemic? And so what they've done is they've looked at it in terms of excess deaths. In other words, how many people are dying per day, per month, per year in excess of what the historical averages are given our population and the age of our population. And the excess deaths have diminished now to where they're just in normal range. So the people that die each day in the world, it's about what you would expect given the population, the age of population. The thing that I like about the excess deaths measurement compared to, say, people that died with COVID or from COVID, see, that was really the thing that was hard to nail down. In the height of the pandemic, anybody who died who also had COVID was kind of lumped into died from COVID, but dying from COVID and dying with COVID are two different things. But there were also a lot of other ramifications. There were mental health issues, including, unfortunately, suicides and alcoholism and delayed healthcare because they couldn't get into hospitals or were afraid to go into hospitals. And so you had all these different things, which were deaths that were either directly or indirectly had to do with just impacts from COVID. When you look at overall excess deaths, you can get a sense for all of those factors together. And at this point, those are within 1% or so of what you would expect in terms of historical averages. So it's a non-emotional, very data-driven answer to this question of when is the pandemic over. And in terms of the virus itself, COVID-19, the coronavirus, one of many coronaviruses. As immunities have been built up in a variety of ways, we're at that point where it's part of the regular kind of viral cycles that all of these different viruses that the human species deals with every year. The impact isn't significantly different than the others.
Okay, and speaking of data, it is time for this week's Data Monday report and an update on inflation.
Yeah, so let's just get right into that. And the main thing that we're going to talk about here is inflation. That was the big report that came out last week, and the data. Hopefully, our regular viewers are getting used to this terminology. We have headline inflation. That's everything. And that was the one that was way up, and then it came down pretty quickly once the Federal Reserve started ratcheting up interest rates and supply chains started to heal. So that's what you see in the blue line on this graph, down to 3%. Now that doesn't mean that inflation going to 3% means that it's 3% higher than it was a year ago. Remember, a year ago, inflation was 9%. So it's not that prices have gone down 6%. It's that the increase is another 3%. You get what I'm saying? But here's the deal. The headline inflation was the main focal point, like it always is. But what we really look more closely at is that core inflation, where you look at the CPI, but you take out food and energy, because that core inflation, those are the things that don't move as quickly. Energy and food, those are commodities. They go up and down based on supply chain and supply and demand. a lot faster than everything else, which has a big labor component to it. So that it was at 4.8%, still came down. So it was good that it came down, but still in a range that is troublesome. If you look in that yellow line, you'll see it's still pretty high historically. It's been a very long time. You got to go all the way back to the late 80s before you see core inflation being at 4.8%. So while it's going in the right direction and headline has come down, it's still, as the reason why the punchline of all this is that I think next week you'll see another interest rate increase from the Federal Reserve. They didn't do it last month. They thought they'll probably do an increase in the interest rate, in the Federal Reserve interest rate, which gets tied to prime rate, which a lot of business loans are based on. That is going to likely be increased another 0.25% because core inflation, while headed in the right direction, is still 2.5 times what where they would want it to be. Now, if we look at month over month, both headline and core inflation came in at 0.2% each. But if you look at the headline inflation up here, this whole year of increases were smaller than this whole year of increases when it comes to the core inflation. So that year over year, still 4.8%, which is what they're most closely looking at. So let's break it down to the components. You see that you'll see here the difference between the headline. Why is the headline and the core inflation so different? Well, take a look at the bottom of this bar chart. Fuel oil, gasoline, coming in at the biggest decreases compared to last year. And then natural gas, number 4. And then you see on those that are 3% or less, food items like fruits and vegetables, dairy and related products, meat, poultry, fish and eggs. Remember when eggs were like going way up, and there was a time when poultry in the last couple of years has really been way up. All of those have come down now. So that's why you see the headline inflation has come down, because these are the commodity items. And the things that aren't commodities or less commodities and more labor-based, those inflation items are still higher than what you'd want to see. Let's talk a little bit about the inflation impact. The big question is still, is there going to be a recession because of this inflation and the interest rate increases that come with it? We don't know really. I think actually the chance of recession has gone down pretty significantly compared to what maybe it looked like 6 months ago. However, if you look historically, history isn't a guarantee of what the future will be, but it's a clue that every time when you see the inflation go up and then down, see here it went way up, and then it went down. What's happening when they go down is interest rates got increased to push that inflation down, but it also pushed economic activity down. So after inflation comes down, each of these grayed out areas, those are areas where there was recession. So historically speaking, these are the conditions where a recession is more likely. But as I look at this final chart for today's Data Monday, you'll see that the wage tracker growth, I like this one because it looks at the 2 quartiles, the top earning quartile and the lowest earning quartile in terms of income brackets. So the people that make the top 25% of earners and the bottom 25% of earners. Now, for a while, the bottom in the blue, the lower quartile, was rising faster than the upper quartile. In fact, it is still rising faster, but you can see it has turned over. And the difference between them is smaller, but you'll see 6.5% and 5.7%. Still very high wage growth rates. And so that has a lot to do with just the shortage of people out there. But as long as you see wages increasing like that, I think the chances that that just means there's a shortage of people. The chance that we're going to feel a recession in the way that traditionally we would define it or consider it, I think is it's not that it's gone. It's not that it won't happen. It's just that I think that the economy has proven to be fairly resilient when it comes to these pressures, and having these shortages in play at a time when monetary policy is pretty aggressive, I think has really kind of been, there's an upward push and a downward push, and it's kind of like more moderately impacting the overall economy. So I guess that's a long way, Sarah, of saying that I think we're in somewhat uncharted waters, but the chance of recession to me looks smaller than it did, say, at the beginning of the year.
All right. So I do want to let everyone know that we have an owner-to-owner networking event next week in Lansing. It's at the Lansing Shuffle. You can learn more at sbam.org/events, but that is July 27th. And we will be back here for the next briefing in a week. So have a great week. We'll see you next Monday.
Hey, thanks everybody. See you on Monday.